Hey, what's up, everybody? Brandon here for Red State. Are you in a forgiving mood? Because the people who enforced lockdowns, who enforced vaccine mandates, who forced you to watch your relatives die in a hospital alone from afar, who forced you to put a mask on your kid just so they could attend class, if they could attend class at all, who forced you to get a vaccine that you knew wouldn't work and didn't want anyway, but you had to in order to keep your job, and you lost it. Maybe you're one of the ones who lost it because you refused to get the jab. Maybe something happened to you that affected you greatly because of a lockdown that didn't ever need to happen. I had to cancel my wedding, personally. Then you're one of the people who was negatively affected by it, and you're one of the people who is now being asked for forgiveness from those who wanted these lockdowns to happen, who wanted these vaccine mandates to happen. You're one of the people who now needs to, the ball is in your court. You need to forgive and forget, according to these people. And at least that's what one person is saying. Over at redstate.com right now, Jeff Charles wrote, Professor suggests America needs pandemic amnesty. What we need is accountability. I agree with that from Jeff. It's not about forgiveness. It's about repentance. By the way, go to redstate.com right now. You can sign up for the VIP. You get a lot of stuff in the back end that you don't get on the front end whenever you sign up for the VIP program, including articles and podcasts. Trust me, you'll want this. There's a lot of great stuff happening behind the paywall. Use promo code SAVEAMERICA. It'll get you 40% off right now. Trust me, you'll want this. Let's go ahead and go through this. After 2 years of COVID policies that destroyed small businesses, forced people out of their jobs, and placed our students behind in math and reading, a columnist for The Atlantic has the temerity to suggest that people should just forgive and forget what the COVID regime did to everyday Americans. The very idea sounds insane to those who saw and experienced the tyranny that local, state, and federal governments carried out for a virus that has a 99% survival rate. Most people who got the virus just kind of had a little bit of a sickness for a little while. I mean, yes, it affected some worse than others, but most people weren't that bothered by it. And yet, we had to treat it as if getting it meant death. Somebody was going to die near you, and it was going to be your fault if you didn't lock down. Despite the fact that this kind of thinking destroyed our economy, held our kids back, gave our kids mental health issues, not just to mention a lot of people who developed mental health issues, including drug addictions, alcohol addictions, depression, suicides were up. Despite that fact, you were supposed to go along with all of these things, despite the fact that you knew it wasn't working. Emily Oster, an economics professor at Brown University, wrote a piece in which she makes the case for a pandemic amnesty and argues that Americans need to forgive one another for what we did and said when we were in the dark about COVID. Now, I think that's very pointed. Need to forgive one another for what we did and said. What she wants is forgiveness for people like her. See, Emily Oster is one of those people who was cheering on the pandemic, the vaccine mandates, the lockdowns. She was one of the people arguing that if it couldn't happen legally, then it was up to families to pressure their family members to get the vaccine. That's how much she believed in it. The author begins her article by recalling how her family struggled with the coronavirus and efforts to limit its spread. She discusses how, when hiking with her family, they wore cloth masks and practiced social distancing, not knowing that none of these measures were necessary. See, I find that a little strange because a lot of people found out very early on that none of these things were working. I can recall there's this one guy on TikTok who proved that the masks didn't work. He was smoking a cigar, and he had a mask on him, and he took a puff of the cigar, put the mask over his mouth, and breathed out, and you could see the smoke coming out of his mask. Not from the sides, from his mask. And he proved that this is too porous. Nothing, the regular cloth masks that they were urging everyone to wear wasn't going to stop a minuscule, tiny virus. It's like putting up a chain link fence to stop a mosquito from getting into your yard. It's just not going to work out. And yet, they made us wear these masks everywhere we went. Even outside in some states. It's ridiculous. It was not necessary. And despite the fact that we knew early on that these weren't working, they still pushed it. Why? These precautions were totally misguided, she says. In April 2020, no one got the coronavirus from passing someone else hiking. Outdoor transmission was vanishingly rare. Our cloth masks made out of old bandanas wouldn't have done anything anyway. But the thing is, we didn't know. We kind of did. That's why a lot of people refused to wear the masks. That's why a huge amount of people had a huge problem with you saw the blow up online. Many people refusing to wear the mask, denouncing the mask, proving the masks didn't work, and yet the people in charge didn't listen. They continued to push it on us. Oster acknowledged that many of the decisions made by government officials were ineffective. Some of these choices turned out better than others. To take an example close to my work, there is an emerging, if not universal, consensus that schools in the U.S. were closed for too long. The health risks of in-school spread were relatively low, whereas the cost to students' well-being and educational progress were high. The latest figures on learning loss are alarming. But in the spring of summer 2020, we had only glimmers of information. Reasonable people who cared about children and teachers, advocated on both sides of the reopening debate. We knew early on that kids weren't really that affected by it. These were observational conclusions that we could see it happening before our eyes. And we also knew that putting masks on these kids was actually far more detrimental to their health and apparently their learning capability. And those were just for the kids who could go to school. Many of the kids were stuck inside. They were kept away from their peers. They didn't develop social skills that you need. And so now they have learning disabilities. But you know what? Forgive and forget, right? This is all just a misunderstanding. No. Many people understood from the very beginning that some of the stuff that they were pushing on us was not working, was unnecessary, and yet they continued. They called us crazy. Conspiracy theorists. Misinformation purveyors. Of course, an article like this wouldn't be complete without taking a jab at folks on the right over supposed misinformation. She noted that there were missteps. Some people intended to mislead and made wildly irresponsible claims. Remember when the public health community had to spend a lot of time and resources urging Americans not to inject themselves with bleach? No, I don't. What I do remember is the media attempting to convince people that Donald Trump was telling everyone to inject themselves with bleach when he did not. That is not what he did. And that was made very clear from the very beginning, and yet the media could not stop pushing that narrative. They had to tell everyone that Donald Trump was a bad guy. Orange man bad, orange man bad. Now orange man stupid because he's telling everyone to inject themselves with bleach to cure themselves of the coronavirus. He never did that. We had to spend a lot of time debunking that lie. I remember that. The author then makes the laughable claim that misinformation is still a huge problem, but that most errors were made by people who were working in earnest for the good of society. I doubt that. Because those people who claim to be working for the good of society were living double lives. You had Gavin Newsom of California telling everyone that they had to lock down and stay inside, and then he went and had dinner at a very fancy restaurant. You had Gretchen Whitmer telling everyone that they couldn't even travel to a second home that they had while she was traveling just fine. You had the mayor of Austin traveling overseas while he was telling everyone that they had to stay locked down. It was rules for thee, but not for me, for these Democrats. So I don't know if they actually had the goodwill or what was it? Most errors made by working in earnest for the good of society. No, they weren't. They weren't working in earnest for the good of society. If they did, if they really were working for the good of society, they would have taken Governor DeSantis' lead. And they would have started lifting lockdowns and stopping with the stupid productions, the safety theater that many Democrats engaged in during the pandemic. Oster goes to insist that getting something wrong wasn't a moral failing and that we have to put these fights aside and declare a pandemic amnesty. We can leave out the willful purveyors of actual misinformation. That would be CNN. That would be Democrats. That would be the Biden administration. That would be people who actually tried to enforce lockdowns, enforce vaccine mandates that did not work and weren't necessary from the very beginning. Those are the purveyors of misinformation. The social media companies, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, who took down people's posts that actually disproved the narrative, the mainstream narrative about the pandemic. Those were the purveyors of misinformation. Not the people who were arguing against them. They were poking holes left and right in what they were trying to sell people. And yet they continued to get punished for it, called pariahs for it. But hey, they want forgiveness for all of that. We can all guess to whom Oster is referring when she brings up the willful purveyors of actual misinformation, right? She is not talking about those who continue to insist that masks be worn everywhere, even after evidence emerged showing that they were about as effective as filling up a pool with an eyedropper. The author certainly wasn't referring to folks who pushed policies requiring people to take a vaccine that did not live up to their promise or lose their jobs. I doubt she would take issue with politicians who shut down churches and restaurants while leaving open liquor stores and big box companies. Nope. It's those people who question the Democrat-approved narrative regarding the pandemic and vaccines who are the true mustache-twirling villains in this epic tale. People like podcaster Joe Rogan are to blame for platforming medical professionals who cast doubt on the efficacy of vaccines and promoted early treatment, which could have saved numerous lives. They weren't hampered down and downplayed by the White House and Democrats and punished by people in Silicon Valley. I wanted to show you guys this real fast. This is something that I found very interesting. It's the effect that things had. People, the way that the pandemic actually came down on people. It never gets talked about. And it's the people who are directly affected, not just the people who lost their jobs, but the people who had to watch their relatives die alone. Dementia had turned my mother into this sweet little girl with the mental emotional capacity of a 6-year-old. They took her from an environment she knew and people she loved and put her in a COVID wing where she curled up into a fetal position and died. They murdered my mom. Another one, how to watch my father die using only FaceTime while he was alone fighting in hospital Christmas week of 2020. My father-in-law died in the hospital alone, not surrounded by his family and friends. We told him goodbye over FaceTime. We will never forget it. Grandma died alone in a nursing home, not from COVID. Fear is losing a job for nearly a year and still somewhat ongoing. Degrading behavior from peers, relatives, and businesses. It's okay to ask for forgiveness whenever you do a wrong. And I am one of those people who is all about forgiving those who truly deserve forgiveness or want forgiveness. But the issue isn't forgiveness. The issue is repentance. Just judging by this article, I'm guessing that they don't really care that they were wrong. What they care about is that you're mad about them being wrong. What they care about is being looked at as somebody who can't be trusted going forward. They want to be able to tell you things and you just automatically believe it. They want you to forget that they were the people who pushed these lockdowns, who kept your kid out of school, who kept you from visiting your family in the hospital, despite the fact that they were dying. They want you to forget about the vaccine mandates and how it destroyed our economy, how it probably got you out of a job or forced you to put something in your body that you didn't want. They want you to forget all about that and forgive, because when the next thing comes down the line, they want you to believe them fully, without question. I'm not in the mood to give these people an inch. They really screwed up. And they don't seem sorry for it. In fact, the fact that they're continuously trying to push some sort of weird idea that the purveyors of misinformation were still on the right and not them doesn't make me feel like they actually care. That they actually feel like they were wrong, that they feel bad that they were wrong. It tells me that they're willing to do this again at some point in time in the future. And they'll continue to push misinformation, real misinformation. They'll continue to tell you that you need to disbelieve your own eyes, disbelieve your own ears. Just shut up and do what they say. Or you're a pariah. Or you're the idiot. Or you're the evil one in the room who just wants people to die. They still have that attitude on them. They stink of it. And if that's the case, then the answer is no. Not going to do it. No pandemic amnesty. Hey, give this video a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.